Welcome to episode 316 of School Librarians United. I am your host, Amy Herman. This podcast is dedicated to the issues and challenges school librarians face every day. As a school librarian in my 18th year, I knew I wanted a podcast which addressed the nuts and bolts of running a successful library program. I don't claim to have the answers, but I hope that this is a platform to share resources and exchange ideas. Now is a perfect time to mention that all the ideas and opinions expressed in this podcast by myself, my interview guests, and listeners who reach out to the podcast are our own and do not reflect those of our school districts. When incorporating research, I always make sure to cite my sources. So whether you are a novice or a veteran school librarian, this podcast has something for you. I welcome you and all listeners to reach out with your feedback and episode suggestions. You can reach me either on Bluesky at SLU Podcast or on X, formerly known as Twitter. My handle is at LMS_United. On Facebook, Instagram, and Threads, you can find me at School Librarians United and the email address schoollibrariansunited@gmail.com. If you include your mailing address, I'll be sure to send you a podcast sticker. And now for today's episode, International Librarianship, and my conversation with Caitlin Wingers. Friends, I'm so excited. Caitlin Wingers, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here. Long-time listener, first-time caller. I've been waiting a long time to make that joke. But thank you. Thank you for having me.
I'm going to tell you right now, people don't usually say that when they join the show, but I'm glad somebody finally did because I now feel like authentic. I feel like, other people who call into radio shows and to podcasts. That's so awesome.
No, you are official. I feel like I'm on with a celebrity. I actually went back today and looked at when I first started listening, and it was January 2023. So we are over 2 years. I'm over 2 years of every week, listening. And so thank you for everything you do.
We've been friends. I know. We've been friends that long. I love that. Well, and by the tone of our conversation, you'd think we'd known each other a long time, actually. I do feel like we do have some things in common. Friends, Caitlin hails from a half a world away. This is your 7 time zones. So 7 time zones, so not exactly half a world away. But Caitlin, would you please, for listeners, introduce yourself and give us an appreciation of where you are and what do you do every day?
Sure. My name is Caitlin Wingers. I am, my job title is elementary librarian, and I work at the American School of Doctoral in Doctoral, Saudi Arabia. Yeah, and I love it.
So I have to ask, because one does not just wake up one day and decide to go to Dhahran. But how did you get to where you are? Because this is, most of us when we graduate from college sort of look around and try and find some jobs. I don't know how many people accidentally arrive in Dhahran.
No, it's okay, so this is my 15th year in education, 15th year of international education. So fun fact, I've never taught in the States. I was the kind of kid in elementary school that I always knew I was going to be a teacher. My mom was a teacher. I loved going in the supply closet and reading the books to people. Every project I ever did was about teaching. So that was it for me. I went straight into university knowing what I wanted to do. And then I had a terrible student teaching experience, crying every day of this isn't, and a total crisis, at 20 years old. Just what am I going to do? This is all I've ever wanted. And it's not what So I finished school, finished my degree, and then worked in a bar restaurant for a couple years. And then when I was 22, I went to Thailand just on vacation. And I met some cool gals who were, working there, teaching, working at a school. And I was like, wait a minute, I'm a teacher. I have a degree, and can I work with you? And they're like, yeah, of course. Here's the stuff, come apply. And 6 months later, I was working in Thailand, in Bangkok. And that was my first time ever teaching. And yeah, first time abroad, I guess.
Wow, that's fantastic. I mean, and I love that you were able to connect like that. I think that teachers tend to have a fairly openness about meeting people and sharing the things that we're excited about doing. That sounds amazing. So take us from there. Your first teaching job, and then so talk about your different teaching assignments that led you to where you are today. Because I know teaching contracts usually are, sort of they give you an opportunity to leave a teaching contract, and you could then go to a different country. So how did that all work with you?
Right. So this first one, it was because I knew the people, like they helped me get my foot in the door. Then once you're kind of in the school, you start meeting other teachers, you hear about their stories, where they have been. And that kind of got me on the track of learning. I didn't even know what international schools were. I was at a local bilingual English school in Bangkok. And so I was like, oh, international school. Well, yeah, I have my teaching certificate. I started applying for other schools. I was lucky enough to be hired for kindergarten position in the International School of Myanmar. So Burma, Myanmar. Went there in 2011, spent 2 years there. That's where I met my now husband. So after that contract finished, then we went recruiting again and we got jobs in Indonesia. So we lived in Jakarta for 3 years, and that's where we got married. We had our first kid. We did that was the biggest big life stuff there. And then from Jakarta, we had friends that were working in Saudi Arabia, and they said, hey, we have your positions if you guys want to come on over or take the interview. And I was like, no, I don't think I would ever go to Saudi Arabia. I was living this Southeast Asia lifestyle. It's very fun, relaxed. But then we took the interview as a practice, and they were telling us about the school, and they had a nursery there where you can bring your baby, and like the childcare is provided. And I was pregnant at the time, and it was like, oh, sold. Yeah, this is where we're going. And so we were hired, and we moved here in 2016, 9 years ago. So, and we originally thought 1 year in Thailand, 2 years in Myanmar, 3 years in Indonesia. We'll do 4 years in Saudi Arabia, and then we'll move on. But it's been really great. And my husband has grown professionally. His background is middle and high school history teacher, but now he's the principal of this school. So he's been growing professionally here. And yeah, that's the story.
Principal?
Yes. A high level of admin support.
I was going to say, I think that's a fantastic way to work out some of the issues that some of us struggle when it comes to funding. We've worked with people who seriously don't know what we do, and wow. So a couple comments. I've interviewed for international positions, and I did so out of necessity because I had a terrible experience in my student teaching. My student teaching was abysmal. And this woman has a special place in hell because I had a horrible experience. And my friends and I, after we were allowed to debrief, and we'd go to Chi-Chi's for Margaritaville and drown our sorrows in $3 margaritas. And then my now husband would have to come and pick me up because, But when I was interviewing, I realized there's no jobs because we were, sort of in this place of teacher surplus in many parts of the United States. And so I went to an international job fair, and one of the first questions, there was only about 15 different countries / areas represented. But one of the common questions I got was, do you have a partner or spouse, and are they certified teachers? And what they were looking for were teaching partners, meaning they were looking for a twofer. They wanted to move people who both of them would be working in the school. And I was like, nope, single, but they're like, but I'm willing to try just about anywhere. And I ended up on Guam, which is hardly a different, it's just sort of Hawaii with a few extra miles. I've been told it's a lot like teaching in Hawaii or a lot like teaching on the West Coast, but that was my experience. And I could have very easily kept on going. And that's amazing. And of course, you have this whole life that is supported by the school that you go to every day, you work in. And wow, that sounds like a perfect arrangement. So, Caitlin, I do have to ask, because you started off as a teacher, you're now a school librarian. At what point did you make that transition to being a school librarian?
Well, this might surprise you. I haven't told you this yet, but this is actually my first year as a librarian. I'm a baby librarian. I know. So I was in the classroom for 14 years, always elementary. And over the last several years, reading was always my thing. Reading, writing, literacy, that was my jam in the classroom. I was on all the committees. The literacy committee, I'm on the LILT team, all the district stuff. And then one time, when I started listening to the podcast, that was it. This was like all the stars aligned. One morning I was on a walk and I was like, I wonder if I could be a librarian, because the librarian at our school was leaving and there was, some movement happening. And I'm like, that would be, I like reading books. I know, I'm just joking.
Can I just say, I am not Southern, but I'm going to do my best. Bless your heart. Bless your heart. Now, friends in the South, please let me know. Am I using that correctly? Bless your heart. Bless your heart.
Oh, I'm just joking.
Continue.
Oh, no. I'm glad this is audio. My face is so red. Okay. No, I wasn't like that. But I was thinking, hey, I could transition into this role. This would be really interesting. So I looked up, I'm an avid podcast listener. So I looked up school librarian. That was it. And yours was the first podcast that came up. And then the one was like empowering elementary students. And I was like, wow, that's like what I'm all about. Okay, I'm listening to it. And it was, I can't remember his name. I'm sure we can pull it up. But it's he was talking about makerspace and like all the programs he's leading and how much he loves it. And I was like, oh my gosh, that is what I am meant to do. And so that kind of started me on this path. Well, I've just got really lucky, honestly. I didn't get the job that time, obviously. I went home and I told my husband, he was the principal there too. And I was like, I could be the librarian, hire me. And he was like, no, that is not going to work out. But then so I work in a district of schools. There's 5 schools. And I spent the last 8 years at a different school in our district. But my husband was recruited to be the principal at this school. And in that transition, I was like an add-on, what are we going to do with Caitlin? And the library role was open. And I was like, this is something I'm really interested in. Do you think I could? And because I have a reputation in the district of being, they put it politely by calling me passionate about literacy, which means like very loud. And so I don't have my MLIS. I don't have the certification yet. My master's is in reading instruction with a reading specialist endorsement, but that's so different than library stuff. But yeah, so I lucked out. That's how I am here now. And it's the most incredible job. I can't believe, I'm so lucky.
So friends, so many things. First of all, the conversation that Caitlin is referring to is with Ben Kort. And Ben Kort, I will be putting a link in the show notes. Yes, Ben Kort, phenomenal person. And one of the reasons why I love having the podcast as an excuse to talk to people, because it is my sort of opportunity to tap some expertise, even if it's for an hour. And be able to share that and do it when you needed it most, So I love that the podcast was able to provide that source of support and encouragement for you.
Yep. And I will say that kind of in that time of, hey, maybe this job will be open, maybe not, I was so energized and interested, and it just lit this fire under me, listening to this podcast, hearing about what other people do in their spaces and like all this cool stuff. I'm just like, this is this is my dream. And it's just every week, it's like I learned more. And then thinking about how that relates to my setting and my space, being in an international school, that's why I'm here now, really. Yeah. So thanks.
So, friends, there are 12 questions in our conversation that I have written out, and Caitlin has had a chance to peruse. We haven't gotten past question 1.
No, that's okay.
Which this is good. It's so, but again, very organic. I'm cool. This is awesome because, there are people who are listening right now who would love to live your life. And by which I mean travel the world and teach and do what we love, but also have, this opportunity to explore and see the world. And so, I love that this is, been your experience. And hopefully the more you share about how much you have gained professionally and how much this has, been enriching to your life and your families, this might convince somebody to say, you know what, maybe this is the year that I decide I'm going to go ahead and look for a job that's outside the United States. I love it. So let's go ahead and tell us about where you are in Tehran. Tell us about your school and the grades you serve. You mentioned your elementary, but give us a little more specific appreciation for that. And tell us about your library.
Okay, so yes, I am the elementary librarian here. Our school is, really, it's like birth to 12th grade, but from like pre-K and below, that's only for teacher children, right? So that's like the nursery thing. So our regular classes start with pre-K. So I teach pre-K to grade 5. My schedule is a fixed schedule. I have 18 classes total. So it's not so much. It's like less than half time. It's beautiful. There's about 1,200 students. Our nationalities, I think there's like more than 60 different nationalities of the student population, mostly American. There's a lot of Saudi students now as well, but we have like a huge mix. Philippines, India, Russia, South America, Central America, all over the world, really. Yeah, just incredible students, incredible families. Most of the students that we teach, their families work in oil or petrochemical engineering. Yeah, it's like really super supportive and interested in their children's schooling. Like that's kind of our community, our vibe. One thing that is interesting, though, is because we have so many families from all over the world, their experience of education is very different. So parents come in with different expectations of how elementary school should be. So that's an interesting thing to navigate, but it's kind of part of the fun of it because you get to learn about other cultures and how those parents grew up, and then you can, it's funny how much we say like, oh, this is the American way. Like, this is how we do it at the American school. And that's why you chose our school. We're not going to give a bunch of homework every night because we want children to have a whole balanced experience of childhood. And, but they do their learning at school. And then when they get home, they should have time to play. And so having those conversations are really fun and relationship building.
No, that's fantastic. I will say right now that when listening to Caitlin talk about her school, so much of this is reminding me of experiences that I had. I lived overseas until I was almost 12. And one of the places I lived was Saudi Arabia. And I lived in Jeddah, which is on the other side. I was on the Red Sea, and you are on the other side of the country. I went to an American school, and so much of what you described sort of resonates. But what I especially remember, because and for us, a lot of my classmates, their families worked for Saudia, the airline. So a lot of the families worked for the airlines and Raytheon and the oil companies and some were embassy kids. But I think something that really connected with me is because every single person living in Saudi Arabia was the Americans at the American school, because I also, like you, I was at an American school. School took on a very important significance because there was nothing else. all of us had been transplanted from someplace else in the world, which meant our larger family, extended family, we weren't there with our extended family. Our cousins, our aunts, our uncles were not nearby. Our grandparents, nobody had any of that extended family, which meant we became very cohesive, very strong. Like our friendships, school was important because we were all in one space together with the only people we knew. And so for us, school was always a wonderful, exciting. We wanted to be there because it's where our family was, our found family.
That's beautiful. And I wonder if that has an influence on how you ended up in schools and education. Feeling that like that formative time in your life where you're really finding stuff out, like school feels like home. And I've talked to other people who grew up in international schools, and that just last week I was talking to a volunteer, and she graduated from this school and she's back thinking about education. And she was saying, like, I just walk into schools and I feel like this is the place I belong because I don't know if I'm Saudi. I don't know if I'm Filipino. I don't know if I'm American, but I know that when I walk into an international school, it's like, these are my people. This is where I belong. So that's really nice.
Thank you so much for taking time out of your busy day to join us for this conversation. We have talked about how you came to work in Saudi Arabia. Let's go ahead and explore what have you found? And I appreciate that you have not taught stateside. So you have not, so your basis of comparison, you have not worked in America in schools in the States. But I know that there are some very fantastic perks to working in an international school. You can speak to several experiences. Let's talk about the drawbacks first. So how about we do that? So if you don't mind, I've already mentioned that as a child growing up and living overseas, my extended family was nowhere. My grandparents, my cousins, my aunts, my uncles, we saw them when we had home leave. And we went home in the summer for about 2 months, but that's the only time I saw my extended family.
Well, you basically stole my words. Yeah. The number one drawback is definitely being away from family. And that becomes more of an issue now that we have kids and our parents want to see their grandkids. That is really tough. But like you said, when we go home in the summer, we live in our parents' house for weeks at a time. Whereas like I know you see my sister, on holidays and every once in a while, but I'm going to be with you 24/7 for 3 weeks. So it's kind of a balance of I mean, they don't like it still, but it's how we feel better about this whole situation. Additionally, there aren't so many drawbacks. One is that you are a guest in your host country. And so you have to follow the rules, customs, all of those things, because it's not, even though we work at an American school, we are not in America. And that goes for, when I worked in Indonesia and Thailand and Myanmar, everywhere. You have to respect the culture, which is amazing because you get to learn so much. But just being sensitive about certain things is important. So I guess that goes with like your personality. If you're more of you like things a certain way, maybe that would be a drawback for people.
So I was in Jeddah from when I was turning 7 until I was 11. So basically first grade, I caught the end of first grade and I stayed there until 5th grade. But I remember vividly being told by my mother, we are guests here. We are in someone else's country. That really did hit home because you behave differently if you're in somebody else's house. And so my 7-year-old mind could understand that means we are on our best behavior. I mean, that's what it really translated to.
Yeah, and our kids know, like, we live here. This is our home. This is where, for now, it's this weird third culture kid. I don't know how much you know about that, but yeah, it's like we can get really into it. But it's not that we're guests, like in someone else's home. It's just that this is where we're living now. This is the culture that we're living in. And these are the things we're going to do to respect that and learn about it and participate in it and, all those different things. So that, I don't know. The more I say it, the more I'm like, that's not a drawback. But for some, maybe it could be.
Right, right. No, absolutely. So let's go ahead and talk about all the benefits there are to teaching in international schools. Because this, to me, again, you are living the life I chose not to live. My first teaching job on Guam, I could have just stayed in the Pacific Rim and just happily moved around and taught from school to school. I chose not to, and I always kind of wonder what that would have been like. So thank you for living the life I didn't get a chance to live. I'm very vicarious right now, but let's talk about all the amazing things that come with being an international teacher.
Sure. I will say one more thing about drawbacks is that because international schools are all privately owned, so you can have nonprofit organizations and you can have not-for-profit in organizations, which I still don't fully understand the difference, but some are better to work for than others. We'll just say that. And then there are for-profit organizations, and the vibe within the school is very different based on the type of school it is. Currently, we are at a nonprofit organization, so it's run by a board of trustees and it's affiliated with the consulate, and you can feel it, right? But I've also worked in schools where you can feel that it is a for-profit thing. You feel like a cog in a machine, right? You're on display to bring in money, to bring in the people, so that the business people can get money. So there are so many different types of schools in international teaching. So if you get into a school where you didn't maybe do your research or something changed over the summer, this happened to us one time. We got hired at a school and then we showed up and it was not at all what we expected. And that is a bummer. That's the drawback. But you make the most of the situation you're in, and there's a bright side to everything. So
All right, so let's talk about those bright sides. Let's talk about the amazing things that come, because I'm going to tell you right now, when we lived in Jeddah, we could not go home for Christmas. So our Christmas was spent in Kenya or Tanzania, or we went to Italy. We went to Rome, actually, and I'd never seen snow. I saw a little snow in Japan when I lived in Japan, but my first, experience in snow was when I was probably 9 or 10, and we were in Switzerland. And so, that was Christmas. So yeah, we had some pretty fantastic traveling experiences. I will say I became a social studies teacher because I had been to so many of the countries that we learned about in my, social studies classes. I'm like, oh, I've been there. Yep, that was my perk.
yeah, it really makes the world feel small and humongous at the same time. It's this weird thing of, yeah, it's beautiful. I'm going to break it down into professional and personal benefits. So I'll start with professional because that's why we're here, Amy. Just kidding. Sorry. Okay. I know I've never worked in the States, so I can't compare it too much, but I have friends that work in the States. And there's so much more freedom here. I feel like the people I work with, and myself when I was in the classroom especially, you get to do the things that made you want to become a teacher. You're not bogged down with standardized testing. You are not teaching to tests. We do a MAP test 3 times a year, but it has no impact on evaluations, or it's just a piece of data that the district uses. And so that is beautiful, right? You get to really lean into the art of teaching, which it is an art. Yeah. And so that, without the whole public school government stuff being involved, you get to do what you love. And that's really nice.
We are going into testing season, and it always feels like we're going into testing season, but our schedule this week is upended because of standardized tests. And absolutely. So right now, there are a whole bunch of teachers who are both hating and loving this conversation at the same time and thinking, you know what? I would choose this life as well. I would absolutely decide to go someplace where we did not have nearly the overload of state testing that we have.
Well, it is possible. I think that's like the main message I want to get through is that it's totally possible and it's also amazing. So another benefit professionally is in the classrooms here, the students are from all over the world. And the benefit that brings to your social studies lessons, your science lessons, your, everything, the conversations, the discussions that happen in the classroom or in the library or, everywhere in the school, it's amazing. Additionally, the parent involvement is incredible. You think it's a private school. And to be honest, a lot of, especially here now in Saudi, most of the families move here because of the father's job. And so professional moms have become stay-at-home moms and they are eager. They just want to like be involved and they're amazing. And so the support that way is another professional perk.
Absolutely. I also have to ask, because this did come up when we were first talking off tape, you mentioned that your housing is rather close to school. And if you could maybe give us an appreciation of where you are in relation to your school, I do have to ask, is housing included in your contract?
Oh, yeah. Yep. Housing is included. Utilities, everything like that is included. We get a once a year round trip flight back home. That's included. Let me think. What else? The savings potential. I don't know if that's professional or personal, and it really depends on where you live. So if you're looking for a international teaching job, there's recruiting websites, and on the school's profile, they give a rating for savings potential. Now, if you go somewhere that is like a dream destination that people really, like places in Europe, right? That's really high on the people want to live there. The salaries will be lower because they know they don't have to pay you as much to get you to come over. If you go to a place like Dubai, you might see like, wow, the salary is amazing. I'm going to be making so much money. But Dubai is one of the most expensive places in the world. And so you're going to be spending just as much. So savings potential, it depends on where you're living, but it also depends on your lifestyle, right? So the salary you make, it's not taxed. So we do file taxes, but we don't pay taxes on our salary. So that's a big benefit. This is the first time we've ever had a car. So previously in the other places we lived, we just took taxis, which are very inexpensive. And also that means no car insurance, no car payment, all that stuff. So savings potential, like we've been very lucky in, what we can invest in and do while we're living abroad. Plus we travel a lot.
You mentioned that the childcare is part of your school. Am I correct? You had little babies when you were going back to work. Did you pay for childcare when you had them?
No, so that's also part of the contract. And this is our school specific here, but there's many international schools that have this type of scenario where after your maternity leave, you bring the baby to school and they stay in the little nursery room. You can go and nurse. They're very supportive of, taking breaks as needed. Now my kids are in 2nd and 3rd grade. And like I said, this is a private school, right? Tuition is high, but we get it. Our children, we don't have to pay, right? We're teachers here. So our kids just get to go to school. And so they're receiving, I talk to our families a lot about this, when they want us to move back. And I say, our kids are getting a world-class private education for free. That's one of the biggest benefits for me. And not only that, there's like the traditional education that my kids get in school, but there's also the more worldly perspective they have from being in school with so many kids from other countries. And also the fact that we do get to travel a lot and they get to see the world. My papa used to say that a trip around the world is the same as a college education, right? You learn just as much. And so we're lucky that we get to do that.
I'm really trying not to be jealous every time I ask a question. I think I knew this as a kid, but when you realize that when I lived in Saudi Arabia, we could be in Egypt in less than 2 hours. And we went to Egypt all the time. And this is like, Tanzania, Kenya. We would go there at least once a year because we were on vacation. We were on break. And you realize that's possible if you're already there in that part of the world. This is amazing. Friends, you all want to make sure to look at the links in the show notes today. You work in an American school. Can you give us a breakdown of what that looks like? Just a typical day for you. You're the school librarian. Let's get an appreciation of what a typical day looks like for you.
Sure. So back to library stuff. This is good. All right. So walking up and down the halls of the school, you feel like you're in America. I mean, it's just like the same vibe. It's American elementary school. Kids come in around 7:30. I always keep the library open in that like morning drop-off time. And then I have the first chunk of the morning free to do the library stuff. I also have a full-time assistant. So I didn't for the, yeah, I did it for the first few months of the year. And it was, my first time being a librarian. And I was like, this is really hard. I can't, this is like, because going into it, coming from a homeroom teacher where your contact time is very high. And I looked at my schedule like, oh my goodness, only 18 periods of teaching. What am I going to be doing? But then the reality hit of how hard it is to manage a library system, space, classes, students, teacher needs, all this stuff. So that's my morning chunk of time. Now I do have an assistant, an amazing library instructional assistant, Miss Khaloud, who has taught me more in the last 4 months about Saudi Arabia than I have learned in the last 8 years. That's been another big perk. But anyway, then I have my classes. We have 40-minute periods, so I see each class once a week, and that is pre-K through grade 5. But I also have a once-a-week class with the nursery kids. So that's the 3-year-olds come. The babies don't come, but maybe next year. But the 3-year-olds come, and it's so adorable because I have a big open space in the library. So the second floor can look down and see what's happening. And those kids are a lot of the elementary teachers' kids. So they'll walk past in the hall, and then the little 3-year-old's like, Mommy, library. And it's like, it's amazing. That's my favorite 30 minutes of the week. And let me see. Yeah, I always keep the library open during lunch and recess as well. That has become more manageable again with having an assistant. But I wanted to make sure that this is just kind of where I live, right? Like it's always open all the time. And I know for some people in their schedules, in everything, it doesn't work like that. But for me, like where else am I going to go? I love this place. I'm going to hang out here anyway. And so if kids want to be here too, that's great. Yeah. Every chance I get to have an interaction with a kid, it just builds readers, I think. We're just talking about books all day and Taylor Swift.
When I lived in Jeddah, the school was called the Parents Cooperative School, PCS. And I don't know if it's still there, but one of my vivid memories is the Scholastic Book Fair. Do you have the Scholastic Book Fair or something similar when you in your setting, or no?
We don't have like the official, like the carts that get brought in with Scholastic books. We have a local vendor, so we have 2 book fairs a year, and our campus, we have the American School of Dhahran, and then just next door, like literally I can see it out the window, is the British School of Dhahran, both in our district. So at that school, there's one K-12 librarian, and here there's me and then a middle and high school librarian. So there's 3 of us here on this campus. Once a year, the British school hosts the book fair, and we take our kids over to visit. And then in the spring, our school hosts the book fair. They bring their kids over. So our kids get 2, but the planning is only for 1. And this year, the middle and high school teacher was librarian. She was like, well, I've been doing this. I know what to do. Just let me do it. I'm like, okay, because it seems really hard. But then there's the Scholastic. We do have the Scholastic leaflets that we can order, and it goes through the British Scholastic, which is funny because sometimes the books come and they say mum.
I was going to say, I just think it's really fantastic that I live and work in Metro Detroit, and I won't see a school librarian until I get on a plane and fly to Philly for our national conference. But you work with school librarians. You have school librarian next door. You have a school. I mean, I'm sorry, just it's ridiculous. But I love that you have other librarians that you can lean on, because admittedly, there are questions that you must have, and it might be nice to be able to reach out, not just listen to somebody ramble on a podcast, but so I love this. So I am curious, because you are an American school. You do feel it's something of like a bubble. You know, here you are, you're in a very American school, not in the United States. You're in a traditionally conservative Muslim country. For me, I was very aware that I lived in Saudi Arabia, and my school year was going to, in many ways, be dictated by the calendar and by religious holidays. But can you give us a sense of how, living in Tehran, what are the reminders that that your school is not in the United States and in Saudi Arabia instead?
Yes, the calendar changes every year because of Ramadan. So every year the start date and end date has to change, because that impacts like when we have our different breaks that fall in between. This last year, we started at like the middle of August. Students started middle of August. Teachers started at the beginning. But then we get out really early this year. So last year we had a very short summer. This year we have a really long summer. And that's all because of Ramadan and then the Eid breaks that are also a part of the school year. And that's pretty typical. Any country you work in, they'll have specific holidays. Like in China, you'll have a big chunk of time off for Chinese New Year. And Thailand, it's for Songkran, their water festival. So, you observe local holidays. But we have winter break. We have like a week off in October-ish, like our fall break. Then we'll have a winter break. The last 2 years, it's been like 2.5 weeks, which is kind of a bummer. Usually it's 3 full weeks. But that always changes based on, it's like a big puzzle for whoever makes that up there. We have a February break, which I guess would be like a midwinter break in the States. And then we have an Eid break, which happens at the end of Ramadan. And that's like a spring break. And that's what we're just finishing. I'm on my last day of Eid break today. So, yay.
As a child, when we lived in Jeddah, I remember that it felt very random to not have school, but we also had no bus drivers.
Yeah.
Because in order for us to get to school, now, am I correct? The women still can't drive?
Nope, women can drive
now. Okay.
Yep.
So when I lived in, when did that change though? Because I'll be honest, my mother could never drive.
Recently.
Yeah, that was recent. Yeah. So.
No, it's been in my time here. When I first arrived in 2016, women couldn't drive. But then I want to say it was 2018-ish. Yeah, that opened up and we all got our driver's license. I have a car now. So yeah. Talking about calendars, another thing that's unique to Saudi Arabia and some of the countries in the Gulf area is during Ramadan, our hours are cut. So for a month, we work half days. That's for students and teachers and everyone in the whole country. So all restaurants are closed. Saudi is there's the most difference. We have friends that live in Bahrain and restaurants are still open there. But here in Saudi, the restaurants are closed during the day. Everything, it's very calm and chill. And our working hours go from 7:30 to 3:30. That's our normal working day. But during Ramadan, this year it was from 9 to 2. And then that was student hours. Student hours were 9 to 2. Teachers were 8:30 to 2:30. So we have I think 2.5 hours less, 2 hours less. I don't know. But it makes for a very fast school day. But yeah, all part of the fun.
That's incredible. We've talked a little bit about the calendar, looking around your school. What other things perhaps are evident in your school that would not be in what we'd call a stateside school, a school back in the United States?
I think in general, it's really similar, especially here at this school. The American School of Dhahran is very big. There are so many Americans. I've worked at schools where, in Indonesia, for example, where most of the students were Indonesian. And so there you feel the host culture comes into play a lot more when it comes to like in music class. They learn gamelan there because the teacher is Indonesian, and there a lot of things are translanguaged in Bahasa and English in schools like that. Here, it's very much, it feels like a little America, and they have like all the sports teams. And this school, especially, it's like a sports school. Like they're really intense. They have the tournaments in the regions, and our school does really well. I'm laughing because I used to be at the small school in the district, and just because there wasn't enough students there, we didn't have the best sports teams, but we did have a lot of heart. And so we would go down losing, but we would have a smile on our face. But all the sports, volleyball, basketball, no American football. That's not a thing. But soccer, football is huge. That's like the main sport. Everyone's playing that. And there are like cricket tournaments because there's a big Indian Pakistani influence here. So a lot of people are playing cricket, rugby because of South Africa and Australia, New Zealand. The families who come, the teachers who come, they really influence the programs that are run.
I swam on the swim team. It was not a school team, but I swam for the Stars and Stripes. We were the USGS, so the United States Geological Survey's compound was across the street from the American Embassy. There was a Stars and Stripes swim team. And so I swam swim team from the time I was 6 until I was 11. And that was part of my life. And I sort of forgot about that. I'm very grateful that you're here to give us a window into what it's like, because I think that it would be very easy for somebody to say, oh, you work in Saudi Arabia, and form their own opinions about what that must be like. And as somebody who's lived in Saudi, I have understand mine are very, very dated. My memories are of a child living in Saudi. I don't begin to imagine what it is like to be an adult and have a family. But by all accounts, this is something, forgive me, but looking forward, this is your plan. You're going to stay exactly where you are. You're living the dream. You've got an awesome principal. I mean,
he's amazing.
Yeah.
Very good looking too.
And most of us are not going to comment on the physical appearance of our principals because it is considered inappropriate, borderline harassment.
I make that joke knowing that probably no one in my school is going to listen to this. Probably just my family.
That's okay. That's okay. I love that you have found a place where you can thrive. You can absolutely thrive.
Can I say 2 things about what you were saying before, though? About the perception of living and working in Saudi Arabia, because I think that this is really important. Because I was a person who said, I will never live in Saudi Arabia. No way. It's because I knew nothing about it other than what I heard on the news, which I wasn't really a news watcher. So it's like I knew nothing. And still I have family members, or, we go home in the summer and we'll explain what we do. And they'll say, ooh, Saudi Arabia, is it safe? To which in my head, I want to say, I don't, because I don't want to be rude, but I say, well, you live in America. Is that safe? When you think about it, yeah, right? We don't lock our doors at night. We go to the grocery store. We don't lock our car. There's no theft. There is no, it's so safe here. Not only that, but our children have a beautiful childhood living on a compound where, it's like a huge neighborhood. It is walled in. There's a security gate, and it makes an incredibly safe, and also, like, they get to have a true childhood. It's like when we were growing up where it's like, yep, ride your bikes home, drop off your backpacks, and then come home at 6 o'clock. Because they go out. My kids have been obsessed with Cops and Robbers lately. They will play it for hours with all the kids on the compound. And it's like, 15, 20 kids running around from one end to the other. Everyone's watching everyone. We have this WhatsApp group on the compound where it's called Canary Kids. And they'll say, like, send my kid home, send Archer home, please. And then whoever sees him will just go, hey, Archer, your mom wants you. And like, they'll go home. It's really like the best case scenario. And I think people have these preconceived notions and they just assume what life is like. And I hope that if anyone's listening to this, they realize that, yeah, it's, how do I say it? You don't know what any place is like until you actually get there. When you get feet on the ground. And I've been to a lot of places in the world, and every place has been beautiful so far. The people, the culture, the everything, if you just take time to get to know someone or just look around. I don't know. I'm getting a little big here, but yeah.
I am so grateful for Caitlin to join us today, because I really do hope that the takeaway certainly is, be open to opportunities to explore the world, and don't let fear or ignorance of an experience keep you from trying something as amazing as Caitlin has. So Caitlin, your plan, you're going to be in Saudi for quite some time. You're not looking for a new job?
Not currently. No, we're contracted for another 2 years. That's another thing. Contracts usually work on 1, 2, or 3-year basis. That's like common around the world. Yeah, and this is our first year at this school here, and we are loving it so far. My husband's job is very stressful. He's a K-12 principal. He's not my direct principal. Also, I can maybe mention, I have an elementary principal above me. He's doing an amazing job at his job, but he has a high stress level. Me, I'm like, I'm never leaving. This is what I'm doing forever. Like, this place, I ride my bike to work. I love my job. I love the kids, the community, every single thing. And he's like, I don't know, I might have a heart attack. So I'm like, no, you'll manage. He's, joking. But I'm like, yeah, first years are hard. Like, your stress will go down. So our plan is, yeah, we've never really had a big long-term plan, because life comes at you in whatever way it does. We know that as our parents get older, the draw to go closer to home or even back to America gets bigger. But we also know that we're happy here, and the perks and the life that we're living here is hard to beat. We're happy.
Caitlin Wingers, I am so grateful you and I crossed paths. And I got to say, you and I messaged each other on Bluesky, and I don't think we connected on any other social media platform. I think Bluesky was the first time we really started to exchange sort of a back and forth. So I'm very grateful to Bluesky for opening up the opportunity to communicate with you.
So let me interrupt you there and tell you a little story about our Bluesky interaction, because I listened to the episode a few weeks ago with Heather Turner talking about how to use Bluesky and get into the library community. And I was like, okay, I can do this. So I started the account, and then I tried, I reposted it. I tagged, I did the things of that episode saying, thanks, School Librarians United. And I'm like, this is going to catch Amy Herman's attention. Well, that didn't. But then there was something else, like something went through, and you wrote me and you were like, hey, if you're a listener, send me your address and I'll send you a sticker. And then I was like, I know this will get her. I'm like, I don't live in the States, but I live in Saudi Arabia. And I knew that you had lived there. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is it. This is when we take our friendship, and I mean friendship because I've been listening to you for over 2 years, to the next level where she knows I exist.
Listen, I'm now on WhatsApp, friends. I'm finally, I briefly played with WhatsApp when I was in Rome a couple years ago. But if you want to, if we can be WhatsApp friends too, if you want, because you mentioned WhatsApp. I'm on WhatsApp because that's how I text Aggie.
Oh,
And
yeah.
absolutely, yes. So we'll do this off tape. Absolutely. So, Caitlin, I am so grateful that you shared all of your perspective today, because I truly think that there are people out there, I am not going to pick up and leave my life right now, but you know what? I am so glad that in sharing your experience, you might inspire somebody else to consider exploring the world and being a school librarian, working in the world. Thank you so much. Would you let listeners know how we can follow you on social media?
Yes. Okay. I am obviously on Bluesky. I'm C Wingers Wonders. I'm also on Instagram at Caitlin.wingers_wonders. That's a little tricky, but also just email me. Really, and my email is Doonan, DOONANC. It's my maiden name. doonanc@gmail.com. Because getting into this world, I know it sounds glamorous and I could never do that. But really, it's people do it every day, and we currently need some teachers. So not the librarian position is full. I'm so sorry, but but if you have friends that you think would like this, share the episode with them, and they can email, because we have positions that need to get filled, like middle school English. If you know anyone, send them my way.
Well, and this conversation started because you had a conversation with teachers when you were in Thailand, and all of a sudden, look at you now and what happened just by having a conversation with somebody. Caitlin Wingers, we're going to put that social media in the show notes. I am so grateful that you were able to share with us today. I hope you have a fantastic rest of the school year. I hope you have a wonderful home leave and you get to see your family. And thank you so much. I'll see you on WhatsApp.
Yay! Thanks, Amy. Thanks, everyone.
Friends, if you are curious to hear about school librarians working around the world, then check out the link called SLU Podcast found in the show notes of every episode for the now 20 episodes which feature school librarians working in libraries all over the world. If you found this episode helpful, please share it out with your team, your PLN, and on social media. Be sure to follow on your favorite podcatcher so you'll never miss an episode. And if you really like listening today, consider leaving a review wherever you listen to podcasts. Reviews help others find us. For those of us living in the Northern Hemisphere, it is springtime, and springtime means job postings for the next school year will start to become public. If you are contemplating applying for a new job this spring, then consider taking a look at the playlists linked in the show notes of every episode. Here you'll find helpful playlists to episodes arranged thematically. We have playlists on getting a job, grade-specific playlists for high school, middle school, and elementary for anyone who's interested in switching grade levels and would like to sound confident when answering those interview questions. There are playlists which can help you answer common interview questions like, what are you going to do for reading culture or programming or putting students first? And there are also 6 episodes in the end of year playlist which address issues which only ever come up as the school year comes to a close. And if this has been an especially long year and you are feeling tired and checked out, then you don't want to miss the Overcoming Obstacles playlist because, friend, you aren't alone. The topic of our next episode will be Becoming an Administrator and my conversation with Blake Hopper. I hope you will tune in.